we're very fortunate to have here with us the Honourable Erica Stanford, here in her capacity as Minister of Immigration. The Minister is going to be giving us an update on the outcomes of the RSE policy review and her thoughts and vision for the future of the scheme. And when she finishes sharing her words with us, she's also going to be presenting the RSE Employer of the Year Award. So, Minister Stanford, welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa ngā mihi nui kia koutou, and good afternoon everyone. And thank you for inviting me back to the Horticulture New Zealand conference. It's great to see you all again, and it's a real pleasure to be here. As you know, horticulture is so incredibly important to New Zealand. It supports communities across the country, it drives our economic growth, and it makes a significant contribution to our primary sector exports. And underpinning so much of that success, as you know, are people. The growers who are investing in their businesses, the workers who are pruning, harvesting and packing, the businesses who are adopting all of that new technology and finding more productive ways of working. And I want to acknowledge our friends, some of who are here today, I'm sure, from the Pacific, who provide the labour and the skills needed to help our horticulture sector running efficiently. This is a win-win approach with the Pacific and provides benefits not only to boost skills acquisition in the Pacific labour markets, but also obviously to our sectors, and provides a valuable source of income back home in the Pacific. It's been critical in meeting peak demand from New Zealand's horticulture and viticulture sectors, which have seen annual export growth from around $2.5 billion in 2027 to nearly $9 billion today. And obviously we've seen a revolution in packhouse automation. The number of RSE workers arriving every year has increased fourfold. 2,150 RSE workers have now got access to fully funded training, helping them to develop some of those critical skills and valuable skills they can take back to their home countries. The RSE scheme has been firmly established as a critical source of seasonal labour for the sector, but its benefits reach well beyond New Zealand. That partnership supports those skills development in Pacific labour markets, provides valuable sources of income and strengthens the relationships that we have with our Pacific neighbours. Thank you for your continued engagement with us as we work to improve the scheme for the sector and for workers. When I stood in front of you last year, I'd already made a range of changes to the RSE scheme, but I made you a promise. I said when I stood here that we would look at the RSE scheme and come back to this conference in 2026 with changes, because you were clear with me that the scheme is incredibly important, but there were parts of it that weren't working as well as they should. You told me how long it took to submit and process agreements to recruit. I hear that up and down the country. You told me you needed greater clarity around cost recovery, particularly around transport costs. You told me accommodation standards needed to be clearer, and you raised plenty of other issues about how the scheme operates today, and we listened. Off the back of that feedback, we commissioned a review with 3 clear goals. First, to rebalance the system so we can reduce compliance costs and better target risk. Second, to make visa settings more flexible while strengthening protections against exploitation. And third, improve clarity and transparency across the scheme. And many of you have played a really important part in that work. You attended the webinars, you invited officials to your workplaces and accommodation sites, you shared your experience of how the scheme operates in practice on the ground in your businesses, and you have continued to engage constructively throughout this review. So thank you very much for all of your help. And today, I'm proud to deliver on the promise I made you last year by announcing a package of changes to improve the RSE scheme for employers, for workers, for the Pacific sending countries. The first area is around rebalancing the system and getting that balance right. The current one-size-fits-all approach to ATRs and accreditation is no longer appropriate. An established employer with a very strong track record should not necessarily be treated in the same way as a new entrant to the scheme or an employer where we know we have had compliance issues with. So we're moving to a more targeted approach. That means making administration quicker and easier. It means reducing engagement requirements for exemplary employers, and it means clearer expectations and consequences where employers don't comply with the rules. Many of you told me 3 years of accreditation was simply too short for established growers who have been part of the scheme for a long time and have consistently done the right thing, and I agree. So we will introduce a graduated model for RSE status that allows compliance resources to be focused where they are most needed. Exemplary growers will be granted 6 years of RSE status. For those with a history of non-compliance or issues that still need to be resolved, 3 years will remain available. And for new entrants to the scheme who are still learning the system and adjusting to expectations, a shorter 1-year status will become mandatory when they enter the scheme. It's a simple principle. When employers have demonstrated a really strong record of compliance, the system should recognise that. And where the risks sit or where there are issues, government resources should be focused there instead. ATRs are another area that I know has been a real pain point for many of you. Having to submit an ATR 5 to 7 months in advance is impractical, so we're streamlining the process. The new ATR system will have 2 potential pathways, bringing it more closely in line with the rest of the immigration system. Employers who have demonstrated ongoing efforts to recruit New Zealanders may be granted a new MSD endorsement. Once endorsed, those employers will not need to provide evidence every time they have advertised roles or lodged vacancies with MSD when submitting an ATR. It's a high trust model with you, our trusted partners. Endorsed employers will simply confirm that their endorsement has been granted or has been retained. For employers who are not yet endorsed, the requirements will remain similar to the current system, but with some important differences for everyone. You will still need to test the domestic labour market if you don't have endorsement, including listing vacancies with MSD. That remains important because suitable New Zealanders should continue to be first in line for seasonal work. But other parts of the ATR that are not related to labour market testing will be replaced with a declaration, including cost recovery and accommodation self-audits. So you'll only need to submit updated self-audits where there have been substantial changes since your previous ATR. So as you can see, a much more streamlined approach. It means less unnecessary administration while keeping the important safeguards in place. You told us the previous settings were slow, they were complicated, they were bureaucratic, and we've delivered this new streamlined approach. Of course, if we're going to make things easier for employers who are consistently meeting their obligations, we also need to make sure that we are clear that there are consequences for those who don't. So a new compliance regime will be introduced with clear, scaled penalties for non-compliance. Bad actors will face consequences, and there will also be a graduated approach up to full revocation. Repeated offenders can expect to be removed from the scheme. And the new regime will be supported by a risk assessment tool that will help Immigration New Zealand identify where the problems are most likely to occur and concentrate resources on addressing them. This is about targeting effort where it is needed the most. The second major area is flexibility. Seasonal work is by its nature affected by many changing conditions. Weather changes, work moves, circumstances change. The system needs to be able to respond to that reality while still protecting workers. That's why I'm making changes to visa settings so workers can maximise their earnings while having stronger protections against the risk of exploitation. And there are 2 key changes: variation of conditions and changes to limited visa status. So variation of conditions, I'll start with those. Joint ATRs are already a really valuable tool for helping to make sure that workers can maximise their time in New Zealand, and many of you are using those joint ATRs, but they don't solve every single problem. Sometimes bad weather or other unforeseen circumstances mean plans need to change very quickly. That's why we will add variation of conditions into the toolkit. You'll still be able to plan ahead through a joint ATR, but where circumstances change, a variation of conditions to the visa will provide shorter and quicker processes that allow workers to move between employers or work sites. That gives employers and workers far more flexibility to respond when the conditions change. In terms of limited visas, I'm also removing the limited visa status of RSE workers, so workers can access the migrant exploitation visas. It means that if exploitative conditions arise, workers will be able to remove themselves from those conditions and access the same protection mechanism available to other temporary workers in New Zealand. But the purpose of the RSE visa will not change. Workers will not be able to move to other work visas. There remains a firm expectation that RSE workers return to their home country at the end of their seasonal work period. That gives workers greater protection without changing the core purpose of the RSE scheme. The third area I wanted to talk to you about today is clarity and transparency. One message came through clear from the review and in talking to all of you. Over time, the scheme has become increasingly complex. Employers can struggle to understand exactly what's expected of them. Workers can struggle to understand what they're responsible for, and we need to make those expectations clearer. One area where that matters is cost recovery. I'll introduce a fixed and exhaustive list of costs that employers can recover from workers. It means that everybody knows what cannot and can be charged. And where transport costs are concerned, there will be guidance on how these costs can be charged. Workers and employers should both be able to understand and anticipate these costs before a worker arrives in New Zealand. So this will be supported by a new cost recovery form required at visa submission. Workers and employers will use that form to agree an estimated cost before arrival, giving workers greater clarity about any upfront costs they may need to repay while they're here. We're also making the work RSE workers can undertake more flexible. The primary purpose of RSE work will remain picking, pruning, harvesting and packing, and that is not changing. But workers will be able to now undertake other tasks that are commonly required to support that work, like operating a forklift. Workers will still need to be appropriately certified, and they will not be able to be employed full-time in those roles, but it's allowing the scheme to reflect how modern horticulture actually operates while keeping the core purpose intact and giving you far more flexibility without worrying whether or not you're falling foul of the rules. In terms of sick leave provisions for RSE workers will also be amended so that they align with the regular New Zealand provisions once the Employment Leave Bill comes into effect. For example, workers will accrue sick leave pro rata from day one, simplifying sick leave provisions for employers. In terms of complaints, we will formalise the existing complaints mechanism. The respective roles and expectations of Immigration New Zealand, the Labour Inspectorate and the country liaison officers will be made clearer. Workers need to know who they can turn to and when if they experience significant issues while they're in New Zealand. We're also strengthening expectations around pastoral care. Internet access will be added to the list of pastoral care expectations, so all workers can maintain connections with their families back home while they're in New Zealand. And we all know that many of you already do that, but we want to make it a requirement. I've also asked officials to work alongside industry to develop a best practice model for pastoral care, building on industry's whānau mana nui pilot. In terms of accommodation, there is one important area where work is still ongoing, and I'm sure you'll all know about that because we're undertaking some consultation while you're all here. Both the industry and our Pacific partners were clear that accommodation standards are still a major concern, and we have to get them right. And that's why I've directed officials to undertake further consultation on accommodation standards at pace. Officials are currently consulting on options with that consultation open until the 7th of August. And I intend to move really quickly once that work is complete and make announcements on the future accommodation settings in September. Taken together, these changes are about making the RSE scheme simpler, clearer, more effective, both for you and for your workers. Longer accreditation and streamlined ATRs will make administration easier. A stronger, more targeted compliance system will allow us to focus our resources on where the risks lie and make sure that bad actors face consequences. The variation of conditions and removing that limited visa status will give workers and employers greater flexibility while strengthening protection for workers. And clearer cost recovery rules, changes to sick leave, stronger pastoral care and further work on that accommodation standard will provide greater certainty about what is expected. The scheme has played a critical role in New Zealand horticulture for nearly 20 years, and during that time the sector has changed enormously. The scheme needs to continue to change with it on the back of the feedback that you give us. It needs to be a scheme that recognises employers who consistently do the right thing, a scheme that responds when circumstances change, and a scheme that protects workers, and a scheme that continues to support horticulture, our Pacific partnerships and economic growth across New Zealand and the Pacific. Last year I told you that we'd review the scheme and come back with changes, and today we're delivering on that commitment. Thank you for the role that you've played across the last 12 months. Many of you have met with me, you've met with my advisors, you've been at the end of the phone when we had questions, and I'm extremely grateful for the role that you have played in helping to shape these. And just from the murmurings when I mentioned a few of the things, sounds like some of them have been well received, but that is because of you. You told us that there were problems, you asked us to fix them, we listened, we had to get the balance right, of course, between workers and employers, the Pacific and New Zealand. I feel like we've struck the right balance. Thank you for your continued partnership as we strengthen RSE for the years ahead. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.